to Mr. Coady, who's head teacher of Stormare School. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. Before I speak on school funding, I'd like to say that today's protest has been organised purely by parents, not by any unions, not by any political parties, but by parents themselves, because they're fed up of the school funding cuts that our schools are facing. And for organising today's event, they need a huge cheer and round of applause. Jo Yerke is a prominent parent campaigner for fair funding for schools, and she says that when politicians speak out on education, the only people who listen are the head teachers. Yet when head teachers speak out on education, the only people who listen are the parents. I've been speaking to officials and politicians for the last 2 years on school funding and telling them time and time again that schools are at breaking point. Yet in this time, nothing has changed. I've spoken to our local politician and I continue to get fobbed off when I tell him schools are at breaking point. He says that schools have got record funding, 40 billion, and it's set to increase to 42 billion. Schools have never had it so good, he says. I'm quick to point out that this is because there's over 450,000 more pupils in the school system, and not because they're increasing the funding per pupil. He then fobs me off again with another line which is said to several of our parents, that the figures are wrong and the figures are scaremongering. The figures are the government's own figures, produced by the National Audit Office, the Institute for Fiscal Studies, the Public Accounts Committee. If the figures are wrong, why hasn't he stood up in Westminster and challenged his own auditors for this? The reason he hasn't is because he knows they're right. Then we get the third fob off, the ultimate fob off for me. And he says, if we had enough money, we would fund the schools, we would put the money into the classrooms. This I find hard to accept, because the money is already there in the system. We're facing £3 billion worth of cuts in real terms in our schools across the country. They're willing to fund 2.5 billion into free schools. They're willing to put 1.5 billion into academic conversions. If they haven't got the money, why are they funding these whimsical projects? We're facing the cuts. They just don't want the money to go direct into the classroom. They're willing to let these other policies go ahead to put the money out of our classroom and in the hands of the private sector, in the hands of the lawyers, the accountants, the land agents. That's the true fact. This lack of funding is having a serious impact on our children's education across the country. I speak to many head teachers in Carlisle and Cumbria and beyond, and I'm continually told the same messages because of lack of funding. We're seeing in Carlisle increased class sizes. We're seeing less teaching assistants in our classrooms supporting our most vulnerable pupils, our pupils with health needs, medical needs, learning needs. All of that support is being reduced vastly. We're seeing less curriculum choices being offered. We're seeing schools in our city that have got rising damp, leaking roofs, plaster peeling off the walls, and there's no money to build and repair these schools. All these projects are being shelved due to lack of government funding going into our classroom. In my own school where I love and work and my own children go to, we're losing 40 hours of teaching assistant support every week at the end of this year. I know my children will massively miss out on their valued support. We're in an election and everything's changed this week. I've read and I've listened to the promises of the three main political parties, and again I'm continuing to be fobbed off. I'm told by the Tory party that there's 4 billion extra promised to plug the gaps in funding up to 2022, admitting there straight away that there is a funding crisis. But let me tell you this, by 2022 there'll be nearly 500,000 extra pupils in our system, and their own auditors have told them direct that there's still a 3% cut in real terms. That's not my figures, that's the Institute of Fiscal Studies. That's the crisis we're in. We're seeing schools in Birmingham slashing their school weeks now by 2.5 hours per week. Imagine if our Carlisle schools had to lose Friday afternoons just to make ends meet. That's the reality we're facing. Scrapping of free school meals for infants shows how inept the government's long-term strategy for school is. This was introduced and championed by the government 3 years ago at the cost of £1 billion per year. Yet they're scrapping it, they're doing a U-turn in the policy, and they haven't even evaluated its impact to see if it's actually beneficial or not. This is one example of whimsical policy choices and government U-turns. We're flitting in schools from one political idea to the next. First it was the academies, then the free schools, now the introduction of grammar schools. Let's just forget these whimsical policies and fund all of our schools fairly and properly like they deserve. Let's be real. Schools in Carlisle are under chaos because of this government policy, and schools are at breaking point. I'm apolitical and I won't tell you which way to vote, but teachers' voices are being ignored by the politicians. What our schools in Carlisle need is an MP who will not only listen to schools and listen to parents and listen to families, but act and stand up for our schools and not roll over and let these cuts destroy the life chances and the education of our kids. I know the parents who've organised today have invited all prospective candidates for Carlisle to come and speak up for education and say what they truly believe. Let's see which candidates turn up and put their money where their mouth is. Joe Yerke was right. When head teachers speak out, parents do listen. Well, listen, ministers, and take note. Parents are speaking out all over the country in events like this. The voice of our parents can overturn this, and they will overturn these cuts. Parents have the power to change this, and I'm sure you will succeed. Thank you.